She was already stomping over the gravel before I climbed out of the truck. Her heels struck the stone path like sharp snaps, and she gripped a clipboard so hard it looked like a weapon. "Excuse me," she barked. "You can't park there. It's private property." I closed the truck door and tipped my hat. "Ma'am, this is my land." She blinked as if she hadn't expected that. "No, you don't. Oak Hollow Homeowners Association has jurisdiction here. I'm Angela Faircraftoft, HOA president, and you're trespassing." I laughed, not because the situation was funny, but because she sounded so certain and so wrong. "This ranch has been in my family more than 150 years, I told her. "I just inherited it after my uncle died. Name's Trevor Jennings." Angela straightened. "That may be, but you still must follow our covenants." She began listing rules about fencing and unauthorized vehicles, scanning my truck as if offended. I looked at the old split-rail fence my great-great-grandfather had built. The cattle in the meadow looked the same as they had a century and a half ago. The only new thing was her and that clipboard. "You're wrong," I said flatly. "This land predates your HOA by a century and a half. It isn't part of any subdivision." Her mouth formed a sneer that tried to pass for a smile. "We voted to annex the surrounding properties for beautification," she said. "Your land is now within Oak Hollow's expanded boundary. You can't just vote someone's private land into your HO," I wanted to say, but she riffled through her papers looking for a loophole she could lean on. "Actually, we can," she declared. "The association purchased the wooded lots next to your eastern boundary, which gave us jurisdiction to expand." I stepped closer. "You realize what you're doing is illegal, right?" Her voice sharpened. "You clearly don't understand how HOAs work. We have legal counsel. You'll be fined for non-compliance. That barn roof alone violates 3 ordinances." I felt my jaw clench but kept calm. "Look, Angela, I'm not just a guy with a cowboy hat and a deed. I'm the governor of this state." She blinked slowly. "You're what?" I let her know I'd been sworn in last January. The clipboard trembled slightly in her hands, but she dug in. "Governor or not, you'll be hearing from our legal team. You can't ignore the rules like an outlaw." I turned for the porch, boots crunching on gravel, and called back, "Then I guess I'll wait for that letter." I heard her stomp away, heels snapping, and since she wouldn't let it rest, she was the type to double down rather than admit defeat. What she didn't know was that I had cameras, paperwork, and lawyers. I wasn't about to let an overreaching HOA president strong-arm my family's property. The next morning I had 3 things: fresh black coffee, the original surveyor's map from 1873, and a call from the state attorney general, an old college friend. He laughed when I told him Angela's annexation story. "She actually said that," he choked out. "Word for word," I confirmed. "She thinks she can expand HOA borders like building a theme park." He offered to send someone from the land registry, but suggested we hold off and see how far she'd push it. I told him I had cameras on the fence posts and we'd watch. The sun was cutting through meadow mist when I saw a white SUV creep down the drive. Angela had come back, this time with 2 men in polo shirts and khakis carrying a measuring wheel and a drone case. "We're conducting a topographic inspection," she announced. "We need access to your back pasture." I refused. She insisted, citing Article 16 of the HOA Charter for environmental assessments in pre-approved zones. "Pre-approved by whom?" I asked. "The board." The board didn't have jurisdiction here. One of the khaki men began assembling the drone. The other rolled the measuring wheel across my gravel and took notes. I pointed out the camera on the fence post and called out their trespass, unauthorized surveillance, and potential privacy violations. Angela accused me of bluffing. I indicated the ridge behind the pasture and told her about a fiber line running to a state wildlife monitoring station, any drone crossing that would risk federal charges. The drone guy froze. The measuring man hesitated, then they retreated to the SUV. Angela lingered, looking at the land like it owed her. "You think status puts you beyond consequence," she said. I leaned in. "That's why I follow the law, and why I know when someone else breaks it." She climbed into the SUV and slammed the door. Back on the porch, I flipped on the monitor connected to the cameras. The footage captured everything: words, steps, their illegal actions, crystal clear. That evening I drove into town to dig into Angela's history. Darla at the records office, a lifelong Oak Hollow resident, wasn't surprised. "She's gotten bold," she said, recounting petty acts like policing the Thompsons over wildflowers and efforts to sway the county zoning board to redraw rural boundaries so she could reclassify more land as community adjacent. Darla hinted she'd been buying support with beautification grants. She handed me a hefty file of zoning requests and warned me Angela played dirty and strategic. On the drive back, my chief of staff called. Angela had filed an ethics complaint claiming I threatened her during a private dispute. She didn't mention her trespass or drone mapping, but the footage I'd sent him had timestamps. "We'll handle it," he said. As dusk fell, I found a manila envelope on my porch sealed with a red sticker. Inside were telephoto photographs of my house, truck, and me, some taken from across the ridge, from the blind spot my cameras hadn't covered. I checked the camera logs. No one had approached the porch. Someone knew where the cameras didn't see. At sunrise, I met with Deputy Ramirez, a trusted local and former cybercrime vet, who examined the photos and told me they were professional-grade surveillance. "Someone's been watching you," he said. The drone team had no warrant or authorization, and Ramirez agreed we had grounds for criminal trespass charges. If anyone crossed the ridge, we could involve federal authorities. I asked him to open a record but not make arrests yet. Let them think I was staying civil. That afternoon, I stepped up my defenses, 2 new cameras with thermal detection and motion tracking, and a pressure sensor buried under the gravel by the gate. Anyone trying to sneak around would leave a trail. This stopped being just about defending my property. It became a probe into something corrupt. Angela wasn't merely abusing her HOA's power. She built a shadow network, twisting zoning rules, collecting off-the-books payments, and browbeating owners into selling. And she'd finally picked the wrong target. The first rail lead came from a woman named Evelyn Greaves, exhausted, weary, and willing to talk. She'd owned a small house squeezed between lots Angela had beautified. One day, she found her home reduced to rubble. The demolition notice had no county seal and was printed on Oak Hollow letterhead and signed by a compliance director who didn't exist. At the courthouse, Evelyn produced before and after photos and a battered folder of evidence. I promised to investigate. I asked Deputy Ramirez to pull every property Oak Hollow had acquired in the last 2 years: foreclosures, condemnations, demolitions, anything that bypassed county channels. Before his search finished, James Lorne, a former city planner ousted after resisting Angela's pressure, arrived with sealed documents, internal memos, emails, budget requests for beautification, and even a requisition for a private security firm, the same polo shirt contractors who trespassed on my land. James confirmed she'd strong-armed board members and rewarded supporters. Ramirez's audit found 17 transfers in 2 years. 9 were marked condemned, with no county inspections on record, and demolition work was subcontracted through a Nevada shell company with no local permits. I took everything to the Attorney General. This looked like racketeering, housing fraud, coercion, likely money laundering. The AG moved to coordinate with state police and the U.S. Attorney. Evelyn called frightened. A black SUV was stalking her. I had troopers at my gate and thermal sensors linked to my phone. I told her to take shelter at the ranch. With AG investigators and Ramirez, we planned a sting. We baited the eastern ridge with a fake equipment drop and waited. 2 figures crossed the fence in the middle of the night. Troopers arrested them on the spot. One turned out to have a history of burglary and insurance fraud schemes. The other had worked for an illegal eviction firm. Their paychecks traced back to the same Nevada shell company tied to Angela's requisitions. Once the arrest hit the morning news, Angela tried to blame rogue contractors, but signatures, payrolls, and witness IDs tied the operation to her. Warrants followed, bank accounts frozen, her house searched. Investigators found encrypted files, photos of targeted properties, and a spreadsheet labeled Reclaimed Targets Q3. Angela was arrested and charged with conspiracy, fraud, racketeering, and unlawful surveillance. Evidence kept coming, and the HOA leadership unraveled. The vice president resigned after emails showed he bought condemned houses at bargain prices, and the treasurer disappeared, last seen boarding a flight to Bice. I held a press conference on the courthouse steps, not as governor, but as a landowner. I didn't flaunt my title. I simply presented the facts. This wasn't about fences, it was about control, using power to bully the people it was supposed to serve. "That ends today," I said. Applause and a few tears followed. Evelyn sat up front, arms folded, her eyes saying thanks without a word. By that afternoon, the county zoning board had undone every annexation Angela had pushed. Properties were restored to their prior classifications, affected owners were slated for compensation, and the courts moved to dissolve Oak Hollow permanently. By weeks, in the ranch had calmed wind, cattle, cicadas, the ordinary noises of home. Evelyn joined me on the porch, murmured, "Thank you," and we watched the sun go down. People kept coming. The ranch had become a refuge for those harmed by Oak Hollow's schemes, while the full scope of the fraud continued to unravel. Curtis, a former county appraiser, told how he'd been reassigned after flagging suspicious valuations, homes listed at far below market and pressure from unknown players. His documents traced the interference to contractors with no real credentials, just shell companies. A mother arrived with her teenage son, whose arm was in a sling after trying to reconnect their water line when it had been shut off for alleged unpaid HOA dues. She handed over a USB of threats and lies. Investigators added utility fraud and negligent harm charges from the new evidence. Ramirez recovered an encrypted flash drive from Angela's computer. The AG's tech team decrypted it and found dozens of recordings of meetings and calls, a roadmap of the scheme. One clip featured Angela discussing using maintenance liens and bogus health hazards to force acquisitions, then reselling properties through LLCs. The AG's office froze transfers and began returning lots to owners. The shadowy D behind many deals turned out to be an out-of-state developer who had funneled nearly $2 million through shell corporations. He was arrested in Phoenix. Indictments piled up. Conspiracy, fraud, falsifying documents, unlawful surveillance, malicious interference, extortion, more than 20 counts across board members and associates. Angela's plea offer was rejected. The trial was swift, packed with residents, press, and lawmakers. Evelyn's testimony was calm and devastating. Witness after witness, Curtis, the injured boy's mother, and others, painted a picture of calculated cruelty. The recorded evidence sealed it. The jury convicted her on all counts in under 6 hours. Sentencing followed 2 weeks later, exposing decades of wrongdoing. The legislature acted quickly. With my input, a new law placed HOAs under state oversight, mandated annual audits, capped fines, and barred annexations without unanimous landowner consent. It passed unanimously. We celebrated quietly, a ranch cookout with neighbors and families, kids running through fields, a guitar, and Curtis gifting a carved wooden sign reading, "This land stands free," that I hung on a porch. That night I walked the fence alone. No trucks, no flashlights, no strangers, just stars and the land exactly as it should be, home intact.